I didn't make a scene. I'm 31 years old, I have a 7-year-old daughter named Ivy. Wait, no, her name is Cleo. And I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened at my mother-in-law's Thanksgiving dinner. I have spent 4 years trying to be the kind of daughter-in-law who doesn't rock the boat. 4 years of bringing casseroles she didn't ask for, of laughing at jokes I didn't find funny, of telling my daughter to be patient, be polite, say thank you, even when no one said it back to her. I stopped doing that the night she's asked me why she wasn't in the family photo. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My husband and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. His family is large in the way that sounds warm until you're actually inside it. 4 siblings, a rotating cast of cousins, a grandmother everyone calls Nana who sits at the head of every table and decides without saying so directly who belongs and who doesn't. My mother-in-law, I'll call her what my husband calls her, which is Mom, though she has never once asked me to. She is the kind of woman who controls a room by pretending she isn't. She doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't have to. She has a way of arranging things so that you only realize you've been excluded after the door has already closed. The first time I noticed it, Cleo was 4. We went to his cousin's baby shower, and there was a kid's table set up in the sunroom. Little plastic chairs, juice boxes, a coloring sheet with a stork on it. Cleo ran straight to it because that's what 4-year-olds do. Every other child at that table was related by blood, his nieces, his nephews, his cousins' kids. No one said anything directly, but I watched my mother-in-law organize the seating, and I watched how she placed Cleo at the far end, away from the other children, and then moved on without a word like she'd simply arranged flowers. I told myself I was reading into it. I told myself that for a long time. By the time Thanksgiving came around last November, Cleo was 7 and had learned, the way kids do without anyone teaching them, that some rooms feel warmer than others. She still got excited for his family's gatherings because she still had hope, and something about that broke my heart a little every time. She'd pick out her outfit the night before. She'd ask me if her cousins, she called them her cousins, which they technically were by marriage, would be there. I always said yes. I always said it would be fun. We drove 40 minutes to my mother-in-law's house. She lives in a suburb outside of Columbus, in a house that is always too warm and always smells like the same candle, something fake apple, something that feels like it's trying too hard. My husband carried in the sweet potato dish I'd made from scratch because I always brought something from scratch. My mother-in-law met us at the door, hugged my husband, bent down to squeeze Cleo's cheeks in that performative way, and then looked at me and said, "Oh good, you made it," like she'd been uncertain. The house filled up fast. By the time dinner was ready, there were 22 people and every surface had something on it. The kids were sent to eat in the basement. There was a folding table down there and a television someone had turned on to keep them occupied. Cleo went without complaint. She's used to it. That should have been my first sign that something had already gone wrong, that my 7-year-old had already learned to be used to things. Dinner was fine. I sat next to my husband's aunt, who is perfectly kind and perfectly unaware of anything happening around her. We talked about her garden. I ate too much stuffing. At some point I went downstairs to check on Cleo, and she was sitting at the end of the folding table eating a roll, watching the other kids play a card game she hadn't been invited into. She looked up at me and smiled because she's 7 and she still smiles at me like I can fix things. I smoothed her hair and told her we'd go for ice cream on the way home. She said okay. The photos happened after dessert. My mother-in-law has a tradition, and I use that word the way she uses it, like a shield, where she gathers everyone in front of the fireplace for a family photograph. This has happened every Thanksgiving for as long as my husband can remember. There's a whole wall in her hallway dedicated to them, framed and labeled by year. I am in exactly one of them. The first year we were married. After that, I started noticing that someone always needed help in the kitchen right when the photos were being taken, and that someone was always me. This year was the first year I decided not to go to the kitchen. I stayed in the living room. I watched my mother-in-law direct everyone into position, his siblings, their spouses, all the grandchildren in a cluster at the front. My husband went and stood with his family, which is his right and I don't fault him for it. I was waiting for her to wave Cleo over. Cleo was standing next to me, holding my hand, and I could feel how still she'd gotten, that particular stillness children get when they're waiting to be included. My mother-in-law arranged the last few people, looked at the group, looked at the camera, and then looked at Cleo and said, and I want to be very precise here because I have replayed this moment many times. She said, "Sweetie, why don't you stand with your mom for now? This one's just for the family. Just for the family." I felt Cleo's hand tighten in mine. She didn't cry. She's 7 and she's already learned not to cry in front of people who've made her feel small, which is maybe the saddest thing I've ever realized about my daughter. She just stood there and then she looked up at me, and in that voice she uses when she's trying very hard to be calm, she asked, "Mom, are we not family?" I did not answer her right away. I looked at my mother-in-law, who had already turned back to the camera, already adjusting his brother's shoulder, already moving on the way she always does. I looked at my husband, who had seen the whole thing, who was standing in the frame of the photo with an expression I can only describe as pained apology, the kind that doesn't come with action. I crouched down next to Cleo. I told her that we were going to get her coat. I told her we were going to say goodbye and thank you, and then we were going to get ice cream and go home. She nodded. She took my hand again. I did not say goodbye to my mother-in-law. I found his aunt and thanked her. I found my husband in the hallway and I said quietly that we were leaving, that Cleo was tired, that I would talk to him at home. He looked like he wanted to say something. He didn't. We drove to Dairy Queen. Cleo got a medium Blizzard, Oreo, and ate the whole thing in the car without talking much. Halfway through she said, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" And I pulled into a parking lot and turned off the car, and I told her no. I told her that some people have small ideas about what family means, and that those ideas are about them, not about her. I told her that she was the most family I had ever had. She thought about that for a while and then she said, "Okay," and went back to her Blizzard. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was devastated. I want to be honest about this, I had seen it coming for years. But because I was doing something I had never let myself do before. I was writing things down. I have a notebook I bought for grocery lists that I'd never actually used for groceries. And I sat at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, and I started writing down every time I could remember my mother-in-law making Cleo feel like a guest in a family she was supposed to belong to. It took 40 minutes and I filled 12 pages: the baby shower, a birthday dinner where Cleo's name was left off the card, a Christmas where every grandchild received a personalized ornament and Cleo received a generic one, a gold ball with no name, that my mother-in-law handed her with a smile and said wasn't she lucky. The time Cleo called her grandma in front of company, and my mother-in-law laughed and corrected her. "You can call me whatever you're comfortable with, honey," in a tone that made it clear what she was comfortable with. I wrote all of it down. My husband came downstairs around 3 and found me at the table. He sat across from me and didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "I know," I said. "2 words isn't enough right now." He said he'd tried to talk to her before. I asked him when. He couldn't give me a specific time. I told him that tonight our daughter had asked me if she was family, and that I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break something, and that I was done carrying that. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What does that mean?" I told him I wasn't sure yet. What it meant, I found out over the following 2 weeks, was more complicated than I expected. Not emotionally, I was very clear emotionally, but practically. My mother-in-law called the next morning. I did not answer. She called 3 more times. She texted my husband saying she hoped everything was okay, that she'd noticed we left early, that she hoped Cleo wasn't coming down with something. Not one word about what she'd said. My husband called her back. I wasn't in the room for that conversation, but I heard pieces of it through the wall, his voice going up, and then leveling out, and then going quiet. Afterward, he came in and told me she said she didn't realize how it would land, that she'd meant the photo was just immediate family, her children and their spouses, and that she hadn't been thinking. She said just for the family, while looking directly at Cleo. He didn't have an answer for that. Here's the thing I had not told my husband, the thing that made the next few days more layered than they might have been otherwise. The previous spring, my mother-in-law had approached us about a financial arrangement. Her house, the Thanksgiving house, the photo wall house, was paid off, and she'd mentioned several times that she was thinking about the future, about what would happen to the property. She'd raised the idea of adding my husband's name to the deed. She framed it as simplifying things, as being practical, as making sure the family was protected. My husband had asked me what I thought. I'd said I wasn't comfortable with it, but that it was his family and ultimately his call. He had told her we'd think about it. We had not yet given her an answer. The Monday after Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law called my husband at work. He mentioned it casually that evening, said she'd asked again about the deed, said she wanted to move forward before the end of the year, for tax reasons. He said it the way people say things they don't realize are significant. I sat with that for a moment. I thought about the photo. I thought about Cleo's face. I thought about 12 pages in a grocery list notebook. I thought about the word family and who gets to decide what it means. I told my husband I wanted to talk to a real estate attorney before we made any decisions. He said that seemed reasonable. I found one that week. A woman who had been recommended by a coworker, and I went alone because I wanted to be able to ask questions without moderating anyone else's reaction. The attorney was straightforward with me. She explained what it would mean for my husband to be added to the deed, what it would mean in the event of a sale, what it would mean in the event of a dispute, what it would mean for us if our own financial situation changed. None of it was catastrophic on its own. But she also said, gently, that these arrangements work best when everyone's interests are clearly aligned, and that it was worth taking time to think about what we actually wanted, not just what was being asked of us. I thanked her and went home. That night I told my husband what I had learned. I also told him, and this is the part I had been building toward for 2 weeks, the part I had written out in the notebook and rewritten until it came out without my voice shaking, that I was not willing to give his family any form of legal or financial access to our life, until his mother was willing to acknowledge that Cleo was part of this family. Not a guest, not a step-something, not a technicality. Part of it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're right, I want to be honest about how that landed. I had spent 4 years waiting for those 2 words and I did not feel the rush of vindication I might have expected. I felt tired. I felt like I was glad he said it and also like it had taken too long and also like I didn't know exactly what came next." What came next was a phone call. My husband called his mother and had the conversation I had been waiting for him to have for 4 years. I was not in the room, I did not listen at the wall. I sat in Cleo's room while she slept, and I watched her breathe, and I thought about all the things I would do differently, and all the things I wouldn't, and all the things I could not have known at 26 when I first walked into that house and tried to be enough. I don't know exactly what was said. What I know is that my mother-in-law called me 2 days later. She said she wanted to apologize. She said the photo situation was thoughtless. She said she had not meant to make Cleo feel excluded. There was a long pause and then she said she knew she had not always made things easy. It was not a perfect apology, but it was the first one. And something in the way she said it, slowly like she was choosing each word, made me think she had sat with it. Made me think it had cost her something. I said thank you. I said I appreciated her calling. I said that what mattered most to me was Cleo, and that I hoped going forward she would feel that. My mother-in-law said, "She's family, she should." I didn't say anything for a moment, then I said, "Yes, she should. We have not resolved everything. I do not think one phone call resolves everything. My husband and I are still talking about boundaries, about what we're willing to do and what we aren't, about the deed which we have declined for now, politely with no hard deadline on the table." His mother has not pushed back. Whether that's acceptance or strategy, I genuinely don't know, and I've decided I don't need to know yet. What I know is that last Sunday Cleo and I made pancakes and she asked me, out of nowhere, the way kids ask things when they've been turning them over for a while, if we were going back to Grandma's house for Christmas. I told her I didn't know yet. She thought about it and said, "I think I want to go. But I want to sit at the table with everyone." I said, "That's exactly what you deserve." She went back to pouring syrup, satisfied in the way children are when something that was tilted finally feels level. I stood at the stove and watched her, and I thought about how much energy I had spent, over 4 years, trying to make myself smaller so that the room felt more comfortable for everyone else. How I had coached myself through dinners and holidays and photo moments by telling myself it wasn't worth the disruption. My daughter asked me if she was family. That was worth the disruption. I did not blow anything up. I did not make a scene at Thanksgiving or send a message to the group chat or call his mother out in front of 22 people. I just stopped disappearing into the kitchen when the camera came out. I just stopped signing off on things before I'd thought them through. I just stopped teaching my daughter by example that being overlooked was something you were supposed to accept quietly. Some people will say I overreacted. Some people will say I should have said something in the room, in the moment, loudly. I don't think either of those people are wrong, exactly. I think there are a lot of ways to handle a thing like this, and I chose the one I could live with. Cleo is 7. She is going to remember that I left with her. She is going to remember the Dairy Queen parking lot. She is going to remember that I sat in her room while she slept and I made a phone call happen and things slowly began to change. That is what I want her to carry. Not the photo she wasn't in. Not the question she had to ask. The part that came after, when someone decided she was worth fighting for, quietly, without making it a scene, because some battles are won by simply refusing to leave the room.